So if you just could sit down and so that we start. Welcome to Sapienza. I mean, many of you were here yesterday as well to start the training week. And welcome to this inaugurating session in our Aula Magna that has been recently restored. I will not take much of your time and pass the word immediately to our rector, Professor Eugenio Gaudio, for his introduction. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you today to this important event, which is part of a larger project called inHere, funded by the European Commission within the Erasmus Plus Strategic Partnership Program. The aim of the project is to share knowledge on the integration and access to refugees in European higher education institutions. We are deeply honored to be a partner of this initiative, especially in such a complex and difficult time, in which the number of refugees is increasing dramatically, and each and every one of us is called upon to act and support our fellow human beings in every way we can. The project has indeed come to a very crucial point. This event within the training week will lead up to the final phase of the activities, such as the preparation of the guidelines and recommendations. The staff training week organized by the International Office has raised great interest, receiving over 80 candidatures, out of which 59 experts from 18 countries, researchers and managers active in promoting the rights of migrants and refugees were selected. As part of the activities organized to help out with the vast migratory flux that has interested Europe over the past 2 years, Sapienza is not only participating in Project inHere, but also collaborates on other activities addressing refugee access to universities. I can remember the Project Rescue, Refugees Education Support in many countries, or the Project Tandem towards empowered migrant youth in Southern Europe. So, we hope that this event also provides inspiration to policymakers to devise migration policies and programs with a view in order to protect human rights of both migrants and communities in which they are going to live. Thank you very much for your attention and enjoy the conference. Thank you, Professor Cerretti.
Thank you very much, Professor Gaudio, for your introduction, and thank you again to all of you for coming here. Immigration, migrants, refugees are all part of what we consider being our third mission and our responsibility toward our community and more in general toward the world. Immigration is also a part of our history. Foreign students are a part of our day-to-day life. And we have the pleasure to have here Leonardo Lombroso, who is the director of a movie narrating the story of one of these migrants who came to Rome at the beginning of the war in Syria, and did his career partly here and then moving to Copenhagen, being somehow a symbol of what we want our university to be. We want our university to be a part of this international system, trying to deal with one of the great phenomena of our era, that is migration. Leonardo, please.
Okay. Good morning. And first, I'm very honored to be here and present an artistic project like a movie in this kind of contest. And but before to start, I want to introduce a little bit myself. My work was done most in Asia. I work in Far East Asia, and deal with the history of Asian cinema, and then I talk about integration, immigration. In the past years, I work more about China, focus in China, and about the second generation born in Rome and the immigration coming from China. And I did this one with documentaries and web series. Then I completely changed my scenario, we can say scenario, geographically speaking, because I moved to Syria. When I started this war, I was very touched for that one, because I think it was something important for the culture of the human in the planet. And I was always thinking about if when they start to bombing Aleppo and Damascus, I was always thinking if they start to bombing Rome, because this is also us is a big history. We have a big history, and I tried to have a feeling of that one. It was very difficult in that period. I really want to talk about Syria, but I really don't know how. And then life bring you surprise, because it came to me through a friend, Obaida. Obaida is the protagonist of the film I'm going to present today. And Obaida, after the second year of the war, he applied for a scholarship in Aleppo. He was in Aleppo. In that period in Aleppo was without any energy. So he found a way to apply and turn on his computer and apply in the night for the scholarship in Sapienza. And he won. And a new life started from him. And he abandoned the family there, and without knowing if and when he would have seen them again. And before going on, I want to present you Obaida. I have a short trailer, so if you can see the trailer, let's see. I have to talk on the back of you there. Yeah, the trailer. Okay, thank you. And this is just the teaser. We call teaser, not trailer, because the documentary is not finished yet. And how you see, we are, no, we don't see. It's, we are in the platform Indiegogo to finish the documentary. So we did a crowdfunding, and we're looking for partner and sponsor or people who can want to help us to finish the project, because we need the budget to cover the post-production. And but I'm going to explain how to make a movie like that. And it's the secret, I think, is the time. Because we spent almost 2 years with Obaida together, shooting his life. And the first period that we met, we spent 4 months just to talk, to take coffee together in the bar, 2-3 hours, talk about ourselves, our experience of life, know each other. It's like a friendship, but it's like a love story, because you are like engaged, and you have to know everything about the private life of the person you're going to tell a story. And he asked me all the time, why you want to make a movie about me? I'm just a normal guy. And I always repeat to him, I think because first I want to talk about the Syrian culture and know about the war. And I think it's very nice if we talk through your eyes, and also because you are young, it's the new generation. And to give a fresh perspective of the Syrian culture, to give a positive a positive sensation to the people. It's not just war and killing people, but there is something beautiful, and this is your culture, and then it's the Syrian people. And we work like that. I call him almost every day to know his plan. When he went to the university, the Sapienza opened the possibility to shooting inside the class, inside all the space of the Sapienza in the engineering, because he studied engineering, and time because slowly he start to forget about me, my camera, the microphone, and they start to be completely free in his reality. And for me, this is very important because I want to pass to the audience the reality of Obaida, but without an interview, without to bring the audience outside. No, I don't want to just give information. Usually documentary give information, no? Interview, and they give you many kind of information, but just that one. And for me, it's very important to give you emotion. You have to be identified with the protagonist, like a movie, and feel how to be here a Syrian in the life of the Western country, the difficult through the language, the culture, the economy, because also the economy of him. And I shot by myself, and this is another thing, helps a lot to go to the intimate world of the protagonist. I was just alone, my camera, and the hidden microphone to him. And this was very easy for him because they don't have a lot of people around him, like the soundman, lights, just me. And why I want to tell this story? I tell you a little bit because I want to talk about Syria, but also because I think this story, I want to make it universal, to launch a message of equality and integration. And I want to use the single story of Obaida to become an example. Like in Latin, we say eximere, that means to pull out. So pull out from the crowd an example of life, and make this one universal. So this example is not just for the student all around the world, but I think it's for everybody. It's a kind of example of life. Because Obaida is like a very smart guy and intelligent, and he knows exactly where to go, but he can't go back, and he knows he can surrender to fate, and he knows its life depends just from him. It's coming from 2 years of war, and this is sign you for all your life. And he abandoned the family because they were in Syria, then they moved in Istanbul, in Turkey, but the Turkish government denied to give the visa to Obaida, because they don't give more visa to the Syrian. And so now it's almost 6 years, he never see his family. He saw the family how you saw it through Skype. And he told me one time, I don't remember the smell of my family. And in this sadness that you see in his eyes, you see a brave guy who start to want everything in his life. He walking in his path. He came here, won the scholarship. He degree here with the maximum of the vote, with Laude. And now he won a PhD in Copenhagen. And this is, for me, it's something special. And he also decided not to bury his dream. He's a teenager. And so he loved singing, and he sent a small video to, how you saw in the video, to the talent show The Voice. And he never studied singing. He never studied that one. And he arrived he landed on the stage of The Voice, and he passed to selection. So he dream, he walk, and behind there is this sadness. And I think this is an example quite strong, because he said, like, wherever you come, you can do whatever you want, if you want. And I think this is a good example to give to everyone. And I want to give you just the last sentence. And see, I check from here if I can arrive to the, okay. Oh, it's coming, okay. This is what happened 10 days ago. Because Stay with Obaida, we live all the experience. And it's very positive and everything, but there is difficulty. He applied for the UK university for a conference. The university approved the conference. The Copenhagen University was ready to pay all the cost to go there for Obaida. And there arrived this letter where they refuse the visa to go there. They say because the website doesn't work, because there's not many documents, enough for going in this conference. They use, maybe you want to use the conference to come here and don't leave the country. And so it's clear that there is still a long way to go, finally achieve real equality of rights. And what I can do is I give my contribution with what I can do better with film and tell this story, but through film. And I want this story talk to the world, send a message to the world. And that's it. This is my project. And I told you before, it's Indiegogo. If you really want to participate for this project and help me for finish, you can just then go Indiegogo. I show you this one. Just that is promotion. I don't have to do maybe. You know. And so this is remember that you have to see the Italian name, Quando non puoi tornare indietro. This is you can find in Google, Facebook, Instagram, everywhere. And just typing my name. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leonardo, and thank you also for reminding us an experience that each of the person working in international relations will have had, and that is how hard it is to get visas for our students. I mean, really, I think that Foreign Affairs Ministry should take care of this, because it's absolutely not right that students and researchers have to renounce because of visa issues. Before giving the floor to Pierluigi Montalbano, who will introduce the next part, I wish to thank our International Relations Office for organizing this week's event, and I also wish to thank UNIMED for coordinating this important project. Thank you, Pierluigi.
Thank you, Carlo. Thank you also, Leonardo, for giving us a strong feeling of the real life behind the projects. And I think it's a very good introduction to the activities of this morning. And let me say that I'm really glad that introducing this Info Day, because I believe that the quality of a society, and indeed the quality of its institutions, passes through the quality of their welcome and integration policies. Of course, this calls for actions that should involve all the components of the society, and I think that in this perspective, universities have and should have a key role. Let me also say that as economists, I would like to be clear in a statement. There is a widespread consensus among economists, supported by both theoretical and empirical works, that migration is net beneficial for recipient countries. is to say that the aggregate added value of migrants for our economies exceeds by far the aggregated costs of integration. That's why I think that being passive in taking actions for the integration of refugees is not only something at odds with our values, with our inspirations towards a global multicultural society, but also a massive dispersion of talents, abilities, and resources for mutual economic development of our society. Of course, the role of academia and universities is key in this perspective, and apart from the key role of Sapienza, already the rector introduced the fact that Sapienza is involved in a number of projects at the European level on the topic, but also, let me say once again, also the relevance of Sapienza in a number of training activities. I'm the director of the Master Program Migration and Development, but there are also a number of courses for refugees, migration, also Jean Monnet modules and chairs on the topic. But also, I would like to stress that there is the Italian academia as a whole that is involved in this, and I would like to stress the fact that there are a number of scholarships that are aimed for students with international protection. Actually, there are 100 scholarships to enroll those students in bachelor, master degree, and PhD programs in all Italian public universities. We have also additional 104 scholarships for Partnership for Knowledge that are currently the call is ready. Or
We won the call for cultural heritage.
Exactly.
I mean, it's 104
scholarship
in the system.
In the system, yeah. I'm talking about the Italian system, which is, I think, a good thing. And it is for being enrolled in Italian academia for all the beneficiary countries, developing countries of Italian cooperation. So I think it is very important to all these to stress all the activities that Sapienza, also other universities are doing in this domain. And as we saw in the docu-film, I think that the content of the inHere project are very key in this perspective. And I think that one of the important feature is the key role of the guidelines for university staff members. Apart from the members of the faculty, I think that the involvement of the university staff member is an important issue. They are the front office. They can greatly contribute to build up a good setting and to ease the welcome integration effort for the entire academic community. Okay. I don't want to take, of course, away much time from the activities this morning, so I would like to move quickly to the panel. We will start with the keynote speech of Felipe Camargo, which is representative of the UNHCR Office for Southern Europe. Please. Yes, I think that it's good if all the panelists can come to the desk. Costanza Ermanin, Political Advisor for the Ministry of Justice, and Konstantino Moskokoritis, Secretary General of Intersos. Welcome to everybody. As announced, I will give the floor to Mr. Camargo, representative of the UNHCR Office for the Southern Europe. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is it working? Hello?
Bless.
Yes.
Okay. Nice work.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I have to say I started this in Italian. I thought it was going to happen in Italian, but I have the notes in English as well. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I have been in Italy for a couple of months now. My name is Felipe Camargo. I'm the regional representative of the UNHCR Office for Southern Europe. And I would also tell you a little bit about myself. I have been working for UNHCR for 24 years, luckily all over the world. in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, in Afghanistan. And it is really emotional to see what Leonardo showed us this morning as introduction, because like Abdia, there's millions of refugees that go through these experiences. And for us that work closely with refugees, this is a daily happening. I'd like to thank the Sapienza University and Rector Gaudio for inviting us. We have been working with Sapienza for many years in different forms, not only through teaching and contributing to the course on migration and asylum, but also now with this initiative, and we are very pleased that we have been invited to be part of the initiative. I think when I was asked to talk about what can universities do, the list is very long. I don't think it's only about scholarships. But before going into that, I just wanted to talk a little bit about refugees today. You know that UNHCR does not only work with those that are recognized as refugees. We work with those that are escaping from persecution, and the numbers are a lot more higher than those that are recognized. Today, we've got a population of concern of 65.6 million. What is the population of Italy? Is 61. And I knew the number. I was just waiting for that. It's as big as Italy, the population of refugees around the world, the population of persons of concern to UNHCR around the world. Not only refugees, but also internally displaced persons and stateless persons. So it is as big as a country in Europe. And 84% of these refugees are hosted in a handful of countries, most of them poor countries, where access to services and education is even a luxury for nationals. Not all the same, but some are countries like Uganda, Iran, Lebanon, Pakistan, Turkey, and Tanzania. Out of this population, there is a whole generation of children, over 6 million children in schooling age that have no access to school, have no access to education. And this is primary school. So we're talking about a whole generation that have lost the opportunity that we do have to access education. UNHCR for many, many years have been working on different initiatives, both to address issues related to primary education and secondary education, and of course to high-level education, which is probably the biggest challenge. Only 1% of those refugees that are in schooling age, university age, have access to universities. So all the work and all the efforts that are done by this initiative and by other universities are really a huge contribution to that massive need of refugees that do not have access to education. 50% of the 3 million, or the 6 million, that is 3 million children, are now attending primary schools in refugee camps or integrated into local schools in countries, in hosting countries. Out of these 50%, only 10% have access to secondary education, and only, as I said, less than 1% have access to university education. In the past, UNHCR has, in support of the German government initiative DAFI, and I think this is one of those aspects that I would like to highlight as a possibility for linking up to existing initiatives, the DAFI program has contributed to university education scholarships with 8,000 scholarships in 42 countries. Only in 2015, 2,324 students from all over the world had access to university education through this DAFI. It's a German-funded program, but it benefits universities around the world that are willing to receive refugees. So it is a program that provides resources not only to the refugee themselves, but also to institutions that are willing to take refugees. The High Commissioner, and you well know Filippo Grandi, is extremely concerned and has prioritized education as one of his main global strategies. And why has he done that? Because as Mr. Montalbano was saying, it's key for integration. A refugee that is educated, that has been able to consolidate his skills, becomes a factor of development in the countries that are hosting. And why they do refugees that? Because exactly the reasons why they had to leave. We saw it in this movie. The commitment, the willingness, the strength, the resilience, the discipline, the strength to go and reconstruct their lives is sometimes much, much stronger than those of the young generations of comfortable countries. What are some of the initiatives that could be promoted and follow up? And I think there is a few points. First one is, of course, that of integration. And I think more than integration, we talk about inclusion, social inclusion. The fact that they were sharing meals is a good example that is not just a one-way. Educating ourselves, and I have to say, me going through, 17 countries hosting refugees, I always learn from them more than what I can teach. So I think it's very important that we keep in mind that the contribution that refugees make to society, to create a multicultural society, is impressive. I just had this experience a few weeks ago in Milan with a number of private companies in Italy that are integrating refugees into their forced labor. And I tell you that I was more impressed by the reaction of the owners and the CEOs of these companies than by that of the refugees. They were more emotional to say, what I have learned from these refugees is that resilience, discipline, and strength are something that we need to take ourselves. I also learned about food. I learned a new language. I learned a whole new set of values. So I think that contribution to inclusion is something that benefits, of course, the refugees and society at large. And creating this consciousness of multicultural society, I was telling, when I just arrived to Italy, I was myself a student in Italy many, many years ago, working with migrants and refugees, collecting grapes and olives in Umbria. And I must say that I never felt excluded, but I was probably privileged and lucky. But those that I was collecting olives with and collecting grapes were people that did feel excluded, that did not feel necessarily part of a society. I believe that not only Italy, but Europe at large is in a moment that can benefit from this contribution of refugees. More specifically, I think that one of the points that came out already is mobility. So I think we really need to work on mobility of students, mobility of refugee students, not only those that are still in countries, in their own countries of origin and are willing to go out, but those that are already refugees sitting idle in camps, willing and trying to learn. And for that, I think we need to do more. Today, there is access to technology and information. Wherever we go and work, people are working on mobile phones. We do have initiatives for teaching in camps using technology, having distance education with universities in Europe. We can do more, but we can also help bring people to enter into these programs. Of course, research. And research is not something that is done as a luxury. Research has to also be based on real life. And we do have a set of programs and activities related to innovation in refugee camps, in integration of refugees, in humanitarian response within communities, a whole set of areas of research that require attention. It's not only the legal aspects. The legal aspects are very important, but without the practical ones to ensure that we can respond to the need of refugees, we don't go very far. Education oriented towards development. And I think that is where eventually there will be a day, hopefully, where he would be able to go back to Syria. I lived in Syria, I work in Syria, and I just had exactly the same feeling that was expressed this morning through the video. One day this country would have to be rebuilt. And what we need to make sure is that we can contribute to that process of rebuilding, not only Syria, but all those many other countries where people have gone back. There is one particular example, Ethiopia. Ethiopia is becoming a power force in Africa. The diaspora, that were many refugees in the US and Canada, have returned to Ethiopia, and they are the ones leading the economy of their own country. Facilitated interstate mobility, I already spoke about that, and I think there we can play a role, being more active in discussions at regional level, in Brussels, in Europe, in regards to the possibility of refugees finding the right to go and study in different countries. Teaching opportunities. We have hundreds and thousands of refugees that are teachers, that have already graduated, that have received education. Being able to enter into the academia, not only as students, is a possibility. If you tell me that you need teachers to come and teach, maybe they don't have all the degrees that are required to be a professor in a university, but they are ready to come and teach as well. So you can have within a refugee population people that can share their experiences and teach. I already mentioned other specific areas of research where I think a lot more needs to be done, particularly in terms of social awareness and social inclusion. It is an issue that right now is key in Europe, not only in Europe, also in other parts of the world, where we need to ensure that refugees can be better integrated into society and deal with a trend of xenophobia and discrimination that continues to grow, and we see it happening every day. I just hope that we would continue working together. I think this is definitely something that we need to reflect on, how to link the dots, how to put the dots together, because there's different initiatives around the world in regards to education. UNESCO is now a lot more engaged than what it was in terms of supporting UNHCR in increasing capacity for education for refugees. And it is not only a question of financial resources. As much as they are very needed, I am pretty sure that there is a lot of interest in having those resources to allow these programs to continue to work. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Camargo. Thank you for presenting the UNHCR commitment in prioritizing education, to reminding us the strong motivation behind international students, as well as all the gains for integration. Let me say something regarding one of my PhD students, which is Mohammed Hamid, which he has a status of refugee from Sudan. He told me once, I had in Italy opportunities that I wouldn't, probably I wouldn't have in other countries. And indeed, now he's doing his PhD research in University of Sussex in UK, and he really would like to come back to Italy and give his contribution to our activities. So I think that there is room for increasing this kind of important exchanges. Okay, let's move to the second speech. Let me give the floor to Costanza Hermanin, which she is political advisor for the Ministry of Justice. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you. This is on, right, definitely. Good morning, everybody, and thank you a lot for the invitation. I'm here. I've been invited as political advisor for the Minister of Justice. I have to admit that I am presently part of the missionary government, so allow me to speak in part about the activities of the Ministry of Justice and of the government more generally. Also, I don't speak for the Ministry of the Interior, obviously, that is more involved than we are in migration issues. But I would also like to speak on behalf of myself as a person who has been working on migration for the past 15 years, first for civil society organizations, and presently as teacher in several universities, mainly outside from Italy, where I teach mainly EU policy on asylum and migration law. I would start by telling you a little bit what's been the activity of the Ministry of Justice and the Italian government recently on these issues by outlining some points. And I would also like to criticize it a little bit, since my role is, I feel a little bit detached from my role. And I would like to end up with some policy recommendation for universities, just as Mr. Camargo did right now, as a person who is involved in several university networks. So I've been working in the Ministry of Justice for the past 2 years and a half, so it's not a long experience. I was coming before from a foundation that has been funding a lot of work on migration in Europe and in Italy specifically. One of these projects, you might have heard of it because it's a project about data and fact-checking. It's called Open Migration and tries to review news on the press and data about migration by providing some solid data and really fact-checking news, and quite a lot of this data, I have to admit, come from UNHCR, whose data are really reliable in my view, but are not as known as they should be or cited by the press. So this is a little bit my background. At the Ministry of Justice, I have been working on migration issues mainly in 3 fields on which the ministry has been involved over the past few years, because migration and of course reception and processing of asylum seekers has become such a salient issues. I think that arrivals in Italy have increased over 10-fold over the past few years, and asylum applications over the past 3-4 years have been increasing more or less at 30% every year, and in some years even 50% from one year to the other, which brought, of course, a huge effort on the judiciary system, for which the Ministry of Justice is in charge, because, as you know, there is the first phase of administrative evaluation of asylum claims, but then if you are refused asylum, or if you've refused the kind of protection that you ask for, then you can appeal to a court. So this is a little bit a role that the Ministry of Justice plays in trying to organize the judiciary around this increased burden in order to give responses to asylum seekers in Italy. And I'll speak a little bit more about it later. Another field where 2 more fields where, on which we have been directly involved have been a little bit a part of the relocation effort, according to the 2015 decisions by the European Commission that have established that a number of people arriving and seeking asylum in Greece and Italy could be relocated to other European states by an effort of solidarity. It hasn't been a very, very successful initiative, because out of 160,000 people who were due to be relocated, only about 30,000 have been relocated, and mainly to Germany, which is something surprising if you think about how many asylum seekers Germany took already in 2015. In this process, the ministry has been trying to help the relocation of unaccompanied minors, because in order to be allowed to go in another state, a minor needs to have a legal guardian who helps him apply for this. And last, another important effort has been the reform of the Italian law for unaccompanied minors, because this attribution of guardianship to minors has been very, very problematic in the past. The procedures have been very long and not as straightforward, which of course is a big issue also for education, because most minors, unaccompanied minors who arrive in Italy are, to some extent, young adults. They're mainly in between their 16 and 18-year-olds, so they are possible candidates for higher education. And sometimes they end up without a proper protection status when they are already over 18 years old, and this causes problems with the integration problems they can be integrated with. So this is a little bit the fields of action that we have been involved with. Probably the major outcome have been a good reform of the law on unaccompanied minors last year, it's so-called Legge Zampa. Some of you might have been aware of that. I cannot claim the success of the government, because this is a law that has been coming from Parliament, from a member of Parliament, but to some extent we have been supportive and we have tried to make it pass through as quickly as possible. The reform initiative that has been taken and pushed forward by the Ministry of Justice mainly has to do with a reform of the organization of the judiciary, the establishment of specialized sections for the processing, for the evaluation of claims related to migration, protection, and freedom of movement. So for people of non-EU nationality and to some extent EU nationality as well. In this view, and here I'm start criticizing a little bit, there has been good work done because we have created specialized sections, and this is very important because the Italian judiciary, well, they haven't been trained exactly in order to assess something like country of origin information, to deal with people who do not speak Italian and who come from territories that are to some extent dangerous for their individual cases, or more generally for the ambience of conflict that they create. So I think that this effort is very important, and since some months these specialized sections have been set up in some of the most important judiciary districts. And this should allow, on the one hand, to improve the expertise of the magistrates, the judges, who have to review the appeals on the decision of the first instance on asylum claims, and so as to make them better, more informed, and to some extent also to speed up the process. Because as you know, as most of you know, people working with asylum seekers and refugees, a big issue in Italy is the time that is needed in order to get a final say on your permit of stay as a beneficiary of international protection. So at least for the judicial phase, we have tried to make it more efficient, to shorten it a little bit, because the times were more than 1 year in order to get a decision from the first instance tribunal and 3 years from a court of appeal. So I think this is a good, something good that has happened, bring more expertise to the assessment of asylum claims. The past government also decided to cut 1 degree of judicial assessment, so there is not anymore the possibility to go to a court of appeal in order to appeal against a tribunal decision rejecting protection or the kind of protection you applied for. This is something I'm not especially comfortable with as a person who is very interested in expanding rights rather than trying to put efficiency before, for the protection of rights, but this is something that has happened, and probably the consequence will be that asylum procedures, at least from the processing point of view, will be, from the judicial point of view, are going to be faster, which is a good outcome to some extent. You will have a decision earlier. You will know if you can stay in a country and if you can attend higher education in a country, for instance, but from another point of view, you have a degree as an assessment less, so one less possibility in order for your negative decisions to be reviewed and or reversed. And this is something. And then I close on the judicial part, which might not be of such interest for you, but I think it is of some interest to know what the legal situation of your students or your colleagues is, and the problems linked with it. Courts so far have reversed about 40% to a half of negative decisions in first instance and in second instance, which is quite a lot. So they have expanded to some significant extent the portion of people getting legal status as beneficiaries of international or humanitarian protection in Italy. So this is a little bit the framework we are talking about. Of course, there are some other issues that have to do with permit of stay, which are not of the competence of the ministry I've been working for, but are well known to people applying for visas, which is the entire issue about the renewal of permits of stay that we also saw in the movie, which is a very, very big issue from an organizational point of view and is dealt by the Ministry of Interior. So I won't criticize this part, but just raise it. From also a critical point of view, I think that whereas some improvement has been made on reception and processing of asylum claims, from the government point of view, not enough has been done on integration. I mean, this is really a part on which public institutions at all levels need to concentrate right now, because of course there has been an emergency of responding and accommodating people arriving, but not the same attention has been paid to integration program. There has been an integration plan that has been drafted with the help of UNHCR over the past 2 years. It has been published in September last year, and it tries to address the situation of people, especially by focusing on language education and integration of Muslim communities. There is a mention of the education and of the opportunity to set up mentoring programs within universities, but I have to admit this comes without a budget, which is a little bit problematic from the point of view of implementing such kind of programs. Now, why is this important? Is this important especially within Europe? And here I come to a little bit more of a critic and political discourse. All these initiatives that you are taking are even more important because in order to integrate those who arrive, I mean, integration is a huge part of the migration adventure, and it is very important for not only the economic status, but also the psychological status of people who arrive and come from a situation of conflict. So it's really key, and it's really key also for the hosting society, especially in a climate in Europe that is, in comparison to former years, characterized by much more hostility towards migrants, to some extent less towards asylum seekers, but the distinction is not always made so clearly by the public. There is, especially in some European countries, and I would say Italy is one of those, as you mentioned before, a specific vision of migrants and cultural minorities coming to Italy to perform and steal low-skilled jobs, rather than contributing to the economy, and therefore an effort by the university in pursuing and expanding higher education for refugees is really important. Just to give you an idea, the main data that are cited on migration in Italy is that there is a population of 800,000 badanti. Right? This is one of the main data that is known, whereas it is not known at all the percentage of migrant entrepreneurs that have set up enterprises in Italy and foreign nationals over the past few years, some of which are always refugees. Whereas the recent annual report from CNA on migrant entrepreneurship that has shown that during the phases of the financial crisis from 2008 onwards, foreign entrepreneurs were the only one who were setting up rather than closing more small enterprises. So this is very important. It's a matter of public perception. And I think it is very important to underline that there are also other streams of migrants, other things that migrants and refugees can do within the hosting society. One more data that I want to cite from the perspective of the Ministry of Justice. One of my responsibilities was prison administration. It is known to some extent that 1/3 of the Italian prison population is made of foreign nationals, which is another data that is not so good for public opinion because, you know, there is a lot of concern that most foreign nationals end up in low-skilled jobs, but also small criminality, mainly related to drugs. Then, of course, there is also this issue that Italy has a pretty difficult citizenship law. So if you come in as a migrant, you stay as a migrant all your life. So maybe it is also a second generation, et cetera, was fully Italian, but is still with this foreign nationality in prison. But, I mean, this is another issue. It's not well known that 8% of Italian GDP is produced by foreign nationals. And this is, I think, a real issue. So the added value brought by foreign nationalities is not known to the public, not so much valued by public institutions, whereas we can see the private sector that is very, very interested in this diversity management and culture of having diversity managers. This is something that in Italy is only and mainly pursued by international companies rather than Italian ones. So I come now to my last point after this introduction that is not completely optimist, but this is a little bit more of the optimist part of my speech, which is about the role of universities within this framework. So first of all, congratulations on what you are doing. I mean, I think it's extremely important. And even more so, I want to congratulate you because I know that there is some collaboration with government about these programs and sponsorship programs, but it's not always the case. So it depends a lot, also because we have certain autonomy of the university on the specific Atenei, on the specific universities that are pursuing this objective. I think that from the point of view of government, it would be really, really important to step up the efforts in order to fund, to do more about this initiative, but also to set up a network. Because of course, CRUI, the Conference of the Italian Rectors, is a means, but in general, it should also be public institutions who make contact about this. And I don't mean only government, but also the Conference of Region and the National Association of Italian Municipalities, because as a matter of fact, they manage a lot of funding that comes from the Ministry of the Interior and also European Union funding for the integration of minorities, for the integration of migrants, rather than education. My second point is about liaising with the private sector. This is, in my view, not done enough, or to the extent that it could be pursued by generally government and public sector in Italy, but also by university, with the exception of the scientific sector and some private university. Whereas there is a lot of interest presently from foundations, banking foundations or family foundations that have both their networks in Italy, but also international companies. I've been taking part in a project recently that is called Supporting Action for Migrant Entrepreneurship, that has been supported by the JP Morgan Foundations. And they have been collecting a lot of good practices around Europe. I don't think they have been collecting all the good practices of Italian universities, but for instance, one of the most interesting projects that I have seen within this good practices collection is about a German social enterprise that has been set up as an intermediary between communities of refugees and NGOs working with these communities and universities in order to help them file their application, translate some materials of the universities, and really putting people in contact as intermediary. And I think that's a very interesting activity, because to some extent it's also difficult for university to go and look for students, I think. I mean, you can do that with the help of UNHCR, but you could well do it with the help of all the civil society organizations doing that dealing with refugees in Italy. And I would be very, very happy, to introduce you to this German best practice, because I think they could contribute to some extent to your effort. Another possible activity that I see are these programs that have been set up in many European universities. I mean, they're mainly of Anglo-Saxon and American derivation, which are policy clinics or legal clinics. What is a clinic is a program whereby some students, mainly in the social science sector, so it's law faculties and political science faculties, are encouraged to set up concrete projects dealing with some fields of public interest activities, and a lot of them deal with migrations and refugees in order to gain credits at the universities. So for instance, I know one example at the University College in Turin and at Roma 3, whereby law students are encouraged to have a practice. Of course, it's under the supervision of a professor and lawyer, whereby they help asylum seekers filing their appeals or their requests to the commissions or to the tribunals. And I am myself running a policy clinic at LUIS, whereby, for instance, we help one organization called Refugee Welcome Italy, to convince the Ministry of the Interior that their model can be institutionalized to some extent. But these are things on which university students get very excited about. If they can have a recognition in terms of academic credits, it's not the typical stage for free that is so typical of Italy, and it can be rewarded, I think, as practice that contributes to learning. And the small point that I want the last point that I want to make is about research and policy advice. I think that your experience here is very interesting and should be brought, as you are doing right now, but I encourage you to do more, should be brought to public institutions in order to understand how to devise public programs dealing with the integration of people, and especially through higher education. There is a network of which I am part, which is called the Alliance of Leading University of Migration, which mainly act on an international arena, mainly advising and promoting policy advice vis-à-vis the European Commission. They did a lot of work with the Italian presidency of the G7 last year, and they're trying to target the negotiators of the UN Global Compact on Migration this year. So they are very, very ambitious, but I think they lack a little bit of experience. So they're mainly about research and policy advice. They don't have this experience of on the ground that you have. So I would encourage you to join them, to give it a little bit more flesh to what they're doing. And the last point is, if you might be interested, something which is a European citizenship initiative that is currently being pursued by some civil society organizations in order to have more access to private sponsor to EU funding. I think this is also something that might be very important because presently funding is, of course, mediated by the Italian Ministry of the Interior, aside from funding in the framework of the Horizon 2020, etc., which is more for research and university. But this idea of private sponsorship, direct private sponsorship by universities with civil society organizations could also be an idea to pursue outside of the pure research activities. So that might also be an option. And so these are the things that I wanted to put on the table, and hopefully some of them will be interesting for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Hermanin, for this very huge, comprehensive speech. Thank you also for reminding us all the difficulties of the Italian system, the lack of solidarity within EU, but also some progresses made by Italy in the regulations, for instance, for the unaccompanied minors. And talking about the difficulties of the Italian system, I think that, again, you mentioned as the last points, again, the role of universities. And I think that we should not forget the key role of the training for residents for the integration. This is something very related to the idea of the European citizenship. But I think that it's very important, the role of universities in providing background for new professions, new expertise, competencies that are required in a multicultural society. Also, in a way that for a society that, as we underlined, looks at internationalization and integration as a way to move forward. So I think it is very important look at the role of universities on the double side, from the residents as well as from the point of view of the international students in a comprehensive way that drives our integration, our I should say also economic possibilities to move forward. Thank you again. So let's move to our last presenter, which is Mr. Mosco Ritis, which is the Secretary General of Intersos. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody, and I'm really happy to be here. Again, thanks for the invitation. We already had some very good points being described here, and I would like to make the part of a humanitarian organization such as Intersos and bring some field reality here in Sapienza. So, Intersos, first of all, my name is Kostas Mouskokoritis, and I'm an engineer. I studied electrical engineering in Greece, and since 1995 I work in the humanitarian sector. I worked 18 years with Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières, and since 2014 I work with Intersos. Intersos is a humanitarian organization, meaning we work in context of man-made and natural disasters. We try to assist victims of man-made disasters and natural disasters, but mainly at the end of the day we work with the victims of war. And refugees, of course, are the majority refugees and internally displaced people are the vast majority of the people we try to assist. We work in countries with protracted crisis. Actually, it's a pity that it's sad that our first project was still is in Somalia. We were created in '92. We started working in a hospital in Shebele called Johar, and we are still there 26 years after. We started working in South Sudan years ago. We are still there in Afghanistan. So why I say this is not to say that InterSource is remaining where we work, but is that the crises are protracted, and actually the majority of the crises where we work are protracted. And of course, we work in close collaboration, partnership with UNHCR in most of our countries where we work. We are an organization, protection-oriented organization, protection in with a vast sense of it, meaning we try to help people, vulnerable populations like women, unaccompanied minors, elders, or victims of sexual violence, but in the vast area also giving them a shelter, a safe place to stay, access to health care or access to water and sanitation. We are in a university today, so I have to say something close to education. So, although education is not our big part of the job, but and it's very good and very luckily it came out also from the World Humanitarian Summit of 2016 that education, even education in emergencies, is very important for the populations in crisis. And I give you a very simple example. Imagine a refugee camp. The conditions are not so, they are harsh, they are not so easy to stay. You have a mother, a lot of times it's the only parent of the family with 3-4 kids to take care. And imagine this lady all day with 3, 4, 5 kids to take care. It's beyond her capacity, resistance to deal with all the troubles of the family. Imagine then that in this camp there is the possibility for her kids to go to school. It's a game changer. So education has become a big part of the humanitarian assistance and the job, of course, of InterSource. And in 2 ways. One is to create a safe, protected space for the kids, protect also and give space for the mother and the parents, and plus try to avoid the loss of a generation or more generations. And this is what our beneficiaries are telling us. They are more interested in saving the future of their kids than anything regarding themselves. So they care for the future of their kids, and education is the basis of their future. So that's why a big part of the job now in the humanitarian sector is regarding education in emergency. And this is a very good evolution, and it's a very, very positive step ahead. On the other hand, the collaboration with universities is also a very important part of in our job. And universities have this capacity of analysis that it's very helpful to us when we work in certain conditions. And we don't have the luxury of this analysis. A lot of studies have been done with the help of the universities. Even with Sapienza University, we had a good collaboration in a project of telemedicine. We will try again to have more collaborations. But the important thing is to understand that bridging the field reality and the research capacity, the analysis capacity of the universities is vital for the quality and the impact of our job in the field. And let's I would like to bring you a bit of this field reality. I just came back from Afghanistan 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and we are talking about the protection of refugees. We are talking about the global compact of on migration, but also on refugees. And Afghanistan is considered by some European countries a safe country to send back refugees. This is happening the last 2 years. I came back from a country where it's sometimes you feel like you are in a video game. I was in Kandahar and I was crossing in front of the airport of Kandahar, and I saw drones flying. It's a very strange noise to hear a drone flying. It's scary, to be honest. Then you try to enter in one embassy, and you pass at least 1 hour of controls in order to enter. Our staff is saying us that every time they go out of their house in Kabul, they don't know if they say goodbye to the beloved, because they don't know if they will come back, because there are always explosions in the city. And then we come here and we see that Afghan refugees are sent back, repatriated to Afghanistan, because it's considered as a safe country. Why do I say this? I say this because the reality is changing, and especially in Europe. You all remember the so-called refugee crisis in Europe in 2015? And then the walls that were created, and then the deal EU-Turkey that blocked this influx. And then we have now a situation where also even the funding is going towards a direction of keeping people where they are. If you see also the famous the trust fund, the EU trust fund, that is supporting mainly security apparatus to block influxes from sub-Saharan Africa and Northern Africa to Europe. I will not go in details on Libya and the rest, because everybody knows this situation, and so I skip it. Where I want to arrive is that as a humanitarian organization, as a civil society, as a part of the civil society, our aim should be to continue working for the refugees, continue working for migrants, on supporting them to have a decent life, to keep their dignity, because the times are quite complicated these days. So tomorrow, actually yes, tomorrow I will go to Greece to visit our mission in Greece. So it's a bit also sad to go to my country and to find out that there are still 7,000-8,000 refugees stranded in the islands of Aegean Sea, in Samos, in Lesbos, which will be also in 2 months. They will start being full of tourists as well, and they are there since 3 years. If you Google a bit Moria camp in Lesbos, you will see that the situation is horrible since 3 years. And as a worker in the humanitarian field, and here my persons who are sitting in the same table with me, they know very well what I will say. It's easy to deal with 7,000 refugees. It's peanuts as a workload for a humanitarian organization, for UNHCR, for whoever. So, but they are still there, blocked in not at all decent conditions. actually, last winter, 2-3 persons died because of inhalation of carbon monoxide, because the heating system, of course, doesn't exist, so they do whatever they can to warm themselves. While we could easily deal with this workload of refugees. And we are talking about the Syrian refugees, the vast majority that we all know where they come from. So, this is the trend that the situation has taken the last years regarding the refugees and the migrants, but of course not everything is so, I don't want to sound so, let's say, sad in my presentation, although my Greek origin is promoting this part. Greeks are always melodramatic, you know, but I will say that there are also a lot of good examples that that changing the paradigm. Meaning, for example, in a very in an area in a suburb of Rome, it's called Torre Spacata, which is really real periphery. It's not at all, it's one of the poorest suburbs of Rome. Intersos opened a center to have a place to stay for unaccompanied minors, and also to work on training and with healthcare. And it's an integrated project to deal with unaccompanied minors, but also people in need, also from the suburb where we are, from Torre Spacata. And despite the rhetoric that host communities are looking, they don't like integration and the rest, we see that in this context, our center is very well appreciated and integrated, this famous word integration, integrated with the local people. So there is possibility. It's not that by definition a migrant or a refugee will be seen as an enemy, as a threat. It depends on how we do the work, how we present, how we fight against the toxic rhetoric that is very common in our days. And I will finish saying that the integration between refugees and host communities all over the world is an issue. A lot of times, refugees are going to situations where, of course, the local people are really in bad situation. I don't want to go far to speak about Uganda or South Sudan, but I'll go to Lebanon. It's a 2 hours flight from Rome to go to Beirut. Local population is unemployed as well. There is an unstable government. So people see a lot of 1 million Syrians coming in their place. They see international aid trying to support, of course, correctly this population, and of course they don't want to have only the burden of this. They want to have a share of that. So it's also the way that we choose, when I say we, I mean the humanitarian community and the donors, is to support both sides in order to have a proper situation, a balanced situation with host communities and refugee communities. And where this works well, there is no conflict between the two communities. So, all in all, I would like to conclude saying that we are in a situation that things are quite complicated, to be a bit elegant on my expression, with refugee fluxes in Europe and in general, not only in Europe. The rhetoric is not the best one, but on the other hand, it's our duty to work to work against this trend, and which is not the first time that happens, in order to support, to be close to people that are really in need. We should never forget when we see a refugee or a migrant where this person is coming from, and from what this person is escaping from. And only by being consistent on our actions, we can help them, and also trying to change the trend, the negative trend of the last years. So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mosco-Koritis, for giving us such a wider international perspective of the difficulties of integration between refugees and host communities. Actually, let me give a very short, more optimistic outlook. We carry out research in Jordan, and we discovered that students enrolled in schools hosting refugees, Syrian refugees, were indeed increasing their scores in all the subjects compared to other schools that didn't have such integration process, notwithstanding all the problems in terms of overcrowding and double shift, which can be interpreted as a sort of positive spillover effects of integration. But okay, it's just a specific single experience, which is good, but I think that the difficulties are there, and we should acknowledge all that. Okay, I think that it's time to move to focus more on the inHere project, and that's why I would give the floor to Mr. Marcello Scalisi, which is the director of UNIMED, which is a network of Mediterranean universities, to present us the activities of the project inHere. What do you want? You have much space.
Thank you, Pierluigi. I can say Pierluigi. We know each other from many years. Yeah. I started with just some brief notes, because probably it's not necessary to present in detail the inHere project and to talk about the activities and so on. First of all, because it was very well introduced by the rector. I was very surprised that the rector was so informed about the project and so on. But first of all, thanks to the previous speakers, and I thank you very much for all your interventions, because I had several interesting notes. I would like, obviously, to thank you again for your intervention, for your contribution to the problem, for your daily job in particular. And obviously, I start, first of all, to thank the rector of Sapienza University and Professor Cereti, but in particular the International Relations Department and Madam Scarano, for the work that they are doing with us on this topic. I would like also to thank Leonardo. I don't know if he's still with us. Thanks, Leonardo, for your movie. In UNIMED, we have, this year we will have a UNIMED jury at the Venice Festival. And we are starting to reflect also the contribution of the cinema on intercultural dialogue and so on. That is obviously very important, in particular in the Mediterranean region. And I think that we could promote your movie and the work that you are doing. Why not to try to help you, to support you in your initiative. I would like also to thank the other partner of inHere project, because first of all, inHere is a project supported, financed by European Commission. Then we will talk a little about European policy on migration, on refugees, and on the other side, they finance projects. This, in some way, they want to clean their conscience about, but we will talk a little about. The other partner of inHere project, because it is a very important partnership. We have with us Campus France, and here we have a representative of Campus France, Madame Rasplus. Ciao, Joanna. Another important university is the University of Barcelona, which is very committed, and I think that there is here Kati. I don't know where is that. Oh, ciao, Kati. Obviously, University of Sapienza, and the European University Association. Here we have Henriette Stobia. Thank you for your participation, contribution. This to show you how important organization, not only universities, but important organizations are working with us in this topic of refugees. And in particular, I want also to underline that the European University Association has these refugees maps where they are collecting also through inHere project, but independently by that. We say good practice, but in any case, we can say experiences of universities around Europe, and not only around Europe, on refugees activities, how to support refugees. And this work is continuously working, obviously. And please, if your universities are interested to show through the map what they are doing, please, we are very welcome to support you through EUA. Okay, I just give you a small introduction about UNIMED, which is a network of Euro-Mediterranean universities. We started 27 years ago. I don't want to underline that the work that we did in 27 years, but the beginning was an initiative launched by Sapienza University with 20 universities, around 20 universities from the Euro-Mediterranean region. Now we have 108 universities from 23 countries. We have all the southern Mediterranean countries with us, all the European Mediterranean countries, some participants from the Balkans, some from the Gulf, which is very interesting for us, also from the north of Iraq, from Kurdistan, from Finland, where there is a very interesting institute on Mediterranean studies. A very diverse network, and we are independent. We are not financed by any government. We are not financed by European Commission. We are financed by the universities. This exactly to explain the main question that I would like in some way to underline is the reason why the universities has to pay attention to crisis situation. The reason why universities has to work on refugees issues. Because all the politicians, all the actors say it's important to do something about education for refugees, crisis situation, migrants, and so on. But if you look at the political answers to this problem, there is not a unique voice. If you look at the European situation, unfortunately. If you look at the foreign policy, we don't have a unique foreign policy in Europe. Look at the Syria situation now. But they are asking us to do something. And I think that the answer is exactly this, that universities can answer with the universal voice. Looking at the human rights, that saying that education is part of human rights, we can exactly do that as network of universities, as universities in itself. Obviously, each university can do part of answer to that. But a large number of universities like UNIMED, but also there are many other actors, other networks that I mentioned, EUA, but also Campus France, but there are DAD that is working with another important initiative, not only Daphne project, but also HOPES project financed by Madad Fund. They are doing a very important activity on that. And when Sapienza, the new rector, Professor Gaudio, asked us to be more involved in UNIMED, we started immediately to reflect on refugees issues. Because it's mandatory, I think, for a big universities, for a network like us, to try to answer and to try in some way to influence politicians on the role of education in general for refugees. Last week we had an important UNIMED event in Brussels called UNIMED Week in Brussels. And we organized a session to discuss about the role of higher education in crisis context, because there is not only Syria. When UNIMED started in 1991, the most important situation at that time was the conflict in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine. That's it. Now we have Syria, we have Libya, we have Yemen. Israel and Palestine is still there, plus Gaza. Is unbelievable. We have Iraq situation. We have now the role of Iran in the region, the chaotic political situation in Lebanon. Jordan is a stable country in an unstable situation. Look at the future of Algeria. It's unbelievable, the situation in the region. And I think that the politicians are asking us to do more, but I think that our role in particular is to invite them to look at the situation with a different paradigm. And I was impressed about, Felipe, about your intervention, because it seems that we don't know each other except for our institutions, obviously, but it seems that we discussed a lot about and we have some ideas to do something in common. You mentioned mobility, and I finish in 1 minute, Pierluigi. You mentioned mobility. The visa problem is an unbelievable reality, not only for refugees. Look at the Tunisian, look at every student in the region, once they have to come to Europe, is a nightmare, And this is the reason why we are asking the European Commission in particular to improve the grants for mobility. Because only if you have more opportunity and you have more problem on that, probably country and government will try to solve the situation. We launched for this a petition to the European Commission to enlarge the mobility program. You know the Erasmus program. Probably some of you had an Erasmus experience in Europe, around Europe, but now Erasmus, with Erasmus Plus program, is open also to third countries. At the moment, with Erasmus Plus, we have around 5,000 bourses per year for Mediterranean countries, which is obviously nothing. We need absolutely more. And also, you mentioned academic refugees, which is our priority. We are working with DAD, British Council, and other partners to submit a new proposal to the European Commission, HOPES 2, it's called, through Madad Fund. Not looking also only at youth, but also to academic refugees. Because the situation in the region is, you listen to the figures about refugees and so on, but try to imagine local universities in Lebanon, in Jordan, in north of Iraq, in Turkey, that have to answer to thousands of youth that want to accede to higher education studies, but obviously they don't have the means, because it's not only time-consuming, but it's cost. The European Commission is offering, through several projects, scholarships, but scholarship is not the only answer, because youth, sometimes, they have to support their family. And they can't study, and that's it. There is a very complicated situation, and this is the reason why also we are looking at academic refugees, because they can give a contribution, or in the camps, or in local universities, or in some way to continue to improve their capacity once the situation will be better. Last week, during the session, we discussing about higher education in crisis context. We had 3 speakers from Libya, from Iraq, and from Syria. The rector of Mosul his speech was really impressive. He described the Mosul situation like Hiroshima. And it's impossible to go in a part of the area of the town because the smell is unsustainable. And you can understand the reason why. The director of Tripoli, obviously in a completely different situation, but again, they are suffering this instability that depends, most of them, from other countries that are fighting about the political situation of Libya, and affected is also our education institutions. And in Syria, we don't have to add any other words about, but in several universities they are starting again, but they don't have any staff, and in some cases they are not allowed to come back. We are trying to do our best, but obviously it's not an easy task. But the UNIMED is an international player. We are based here in Rome. Most of our team is Italian, but looking at the diversity of management that we have, I have to mention that what our president said in a speech that he had in Rabat during a conference. We are very diverse because our president is Moroccan. This is the former rector of Mohamed Senk of Rabat. The Secretary General, the new one, is a Tunisian, the former rector of the University of Tunis, and the director, myself, I'm Sicilian. We are very diverse and very Mediterranean. I hope soon that we will be able to open, like we have in Rabat, a small antenna, and in Palestine at the University of Nablus. And again, I remind you, Palestine is still there, in a very unbelievable, again, situation. It's not a matter of education. They are very well-educated people, but the crisis of Palestine remains there. And I hope soon, just to finish, that thanks to our projects, our initiative, I forgot to mention rescue project, and we are doing a sort of SOS unit, rescue unit in local universities, able to answer to refugees' needs. I hope that soon we will be able to open our branch in Syria, inshallah, in Lebanon, and surely in Jordan to give our contribution directly on the field. Thank you very much.
Speech that testifies once again that we are not just talking about projects, but we're talking about real life and passions. If I'm not wrong, now we have some testimonials from European universities. First of all, there is Catherine Miller for the Institute of International Education. Then she'd like to give her contribution. Please. You have PowerPoint? Okay.
Now I have my identity.
Now you're happy.
Great. Is this on? Great. Thank you for having me. And I'd also like to thank all of you here in the audience. It's lovely to be among so many people interested in this very important topic. So I actually don't represent a university, but rather I am here from the Institute of International Education. We're a New York-based institute founded primarily for the purpose of scholarship management. But in the latter years, we've been very focused on providing education opportunities for displaced students caught in education emergencies. Excuse me. So specifically, I work for a program called PEER, but the way that PEER came about was from the IIE Syria Consortium. The Syria Consortium is a group of more than 80 institutions, primarily US, but not only US, institutions that at the start of the Syria crisis decided to waive tuition for at least one Syrian student. While 80 is just a drop in the bucket, we feel that it was a start. And through this initiative, we've come to create the Platform for Education and Emergencies Response. I'll get into a little more about what that is in just a moment. And as I was mentioning, though 80 is just a drop in the bucket, there are over 20,000 institutions, universities worldwide. And if every single university chose to accept one student, we would perhaps save portions of, if not entire, academic academies. And so many lives would be impacted. So I encourage all of you, while I know situations vary at your respective universities, to encourage administration, staff, and so forth to accept displaced students. It's really important, student voices. We know they've had great impact in the United States, and the same has happened in Germany, Finland, UK, Canada, and elsewhere. As somebody already mentioned, there have been hundreds of thousands of students displaced by war, but only 1% of them have access to higher education, while the global average of access to higher education is 34%. The gap is enormous. But there is good news, and one of the parts of good news is that we're all sitting here today, because prior to the Syria crisis, I'm not sure that higher education and emergencies was on the map. It wasn't on the map of concern. Everyone is focused on the humanitarian response, as they rightfully should be. However, education certainly matters just as much. I also see a change over the last several years of the recognition that education isn't just a development concern, it's also a humanitarian concern. If you ask a mother what they want, and I know this point was already made, but I want to make it again. If you ask a mother what they want for their child, they're more apt to say education over any other need. More than food, more than shelter, they say, I want my child to go to school. Sorry. So the peer platform, we decided to start at square one because there are so many university initiatives out there and there are so many students seeking scholarships and other opportunities. But the problem is we can't connect the dots, or at least students are unaware that they have the chance to go to university or that scholarships exist just for them. My colleague James King at IIE did research in 2013 specifically related to the Syria crisis, which showed that those students who do not access higher education are at greater risk for extremism and early childhood marriage for women. So, we're talking about how higher education is really important, but I think it's also important to remember the specific reasons why. So, PEER is a database, first and foremost. It's the cornerstone of our project. It features hundreds of opportunities for Syrian students. We focused on Syrian students in the first year. However, we're now expanding to other populations of displaced students. But forgive me for mentioning Syria over and over. I think we all know it's one of the more salient crises of our time, but we also recognize that there are many others. Thank you. This is the homepage of the platform. So like I said, it's a database, very easily searchable. We made the database user-friendly for mobile. We know a lot of refugees are on mobile phones. We also know that many have very low bandwidth. So the site, if you're to go on it, iiepeer.org, is very user-friendly and it's very quick, very snappy. There are 3 entry points, not just for students, but also for universities and organizations. So students can easily search for the degree type, country, and what they seek to study. Because we know that when a refugee types in the search in Google, refugee scholarships, there are over 1 million results in many instances. So it's a jungle out there. Applying to university is difficult for any student, let alone a displaced student who may feel disoriented, not know where to start, and so forth. This is an example, thank you. This is an example of the search page. As I mentioned, you can search for opportunities in which country you wish to study in all degree types. Soon, when we expand the database, we'll actually have a section that says, I'm a student from country X or country Y. Of course, they self-identify, but there'll be scholarships in here that are specific to those students from those countries. Second entry point, peer for universities. So one thing we do is we have somebody fully dedicated to researching opportunities. However, if you're a university and you offer a scholarship, even just one, please go on our site and sign up. We vet the opportunity and then we post the results. We also have a directory, so you can search very quickly to see other universities that are involved in refugee access to higher education. You click on any of these, American University in Cairo, for example, and you can see very quickly who they are and what they do. We have the same thing for organizations. Soon there'll be a keyword search that will make that very easy. Again, the same format for organizations. Quick timeline. So we, as I mentioned, formed the website in March of 2017. We also have an additional Arabic website. The content matches the English site. Soon we're going to be implementing advising services. The reason we're doing that is because it's one thing, as I mentioned, to search for opportunities. It's another to be a student and have the assistance in applying to universities. New countries have new systems of study. A student in the UK, for example, or a student in the US has counselors and so forth that help them write applications and essays and interviews. We want to do the same for refugee students. So soon there'll be virtual advising services where a student can sign up, and be connected with a volunteer, sorry. We'll also have a conference, and we're about to launch in-depth research on higher education emergencies. An example of our Arabic site at the bottom, and a very important quote, which I won't read now. The final slide, just a quick bit of analytics. We have over 20,000 users in the first year. So users aren't just looking at the site quickly, they're spending ample time really researching opportunities, and we are seeing results. Students are getting to university. The greatest age range of users is actually 25 to 34. That surprised us. It also shows the need to not forget about those who may be past that classic age of 18 to 24, but still desire to become educated at the higher education level. And lastly, there are more women using this site than men by a small margin, but we know that most universities have greater male students than female, at least in the refugee population. So another sign, it tells us who we need to target and why we need to target them. And finally, I'll just say, I'd want to editorialize for a second and just say that, you know, we talk about the need for education. We talk about the ability of those who attend higher education to help rebuild societies. But in working with students directly in a prior role, I know that one of the first things they tell me is that when they get to university, they aren't just a refugee anymore, they're a student. They're an international student, and their well-being and their desire is probably one of the greatest reasons that we need to give attention to this topic. Thanks.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Catherine, for showing us the best practice of the project peer, and also for reminding us that the issue that I mentioned before about the Jordan case is also a result of strong commitments by a number of projects like that. Now let's move to the second presenter, which is Thomas Dutel, Europa Universitat Flensburg. Welcome. Do you have a presentation as well?
Actually, I do.
Okay, good.
Empty glass or some water?
Oh yeah, actually we take some water.
To do that.
So I just steer here. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. So good morning, everybody. My name is Thomas Duttle. I'm the coordinator for the refugee programs at Europa-Universität Flensburg in the very north of Germany. And first of all, I would like to thank Sapienza University and the entire inHere consortium for inviting me, for providing this great information, discussion, and networking opportunity, and also for letting me present the refugee programs and projects at our university. And before I present them, I would actually like to present you my university quickly, since it may be unknown to most of you. It's a very young university. It was only established in 1994. It used to be a teacher training college before. It has slightly less students than Sapienza University. I yesterday read that Sapienza has more than 100,000 students. Okay, we have 5,700, but we are fast growing. And a special feature of our university is that it's the northernmost university in Germany. It's located close to the German-Danish border, and that's important insofar as when the Danes closed their borders to refugees a couple of years ago, many refugees stranded in Flensburg. So we have a quite large refugee population in Flensburg, and our university has then decided to integrate refugee integration into the internationalization strategy, and not only to take responsibility for integrating refugees, but also to profit from them by making the campus more international, by like getting new perspectives from international students, and by bringing many of them into our study programs. And we have a specialization in European studies, management, environmental sciences, sustainable development, and still education and teacher training. So, which refugee programs and projects do we have? Well, the centerpiece of our refugee integration programs is the program for the academic preparation and integration of refugees, or abbreviated PROREF. And I will delve into that program a bit further in a minute. Apart from that, we have individual counseling on study and career opportunities for refugees, on funding opportunities, also on the asylum seeking process, on childcare provision, etc. So that's all provided by our unit, which is a subunit of the international office of Europa-Universität Flensburg. We also offer individual assistance with apartment search, university application, funding application for student loans, BAföG, which is a German loan system for students, scholarships, and that's mainly provided by student assistance. We offer course-related excursions, socio-cultural activities, to bring together domestic, international, and refugee students. We have a buddy, or we plan a buddy program for the fall semester of this year, where we want to make this exchange between our domestic and refugee students even deeper. And our university also plans to have an international student housing together with the University of Applied Sciences, which is also located at our campus. So I'll talk about this centerpiece of our programs, which is the ProRef program. The main objectives of this program is language, methodological, and cultural preparation for higher education for refugees. And then actually to bring refugees into this higher education. This program is funded very generously both by the Federal Republic of Germany and also by the federal state of Schleswig-Holstein, where Flensburg is located in. Germany provides the funding via its German Academic Exchange Service. And we have started our program in 2016 in a pilot round, if you will. There was an ultimate need for access to higher education for refugees, and we started with 30 participants. In the second program round, we already had 40 participants in our preparation program, and of these 70 participants, we were able to integrate roughly a third into actual study programs after this preparatory program. Right now, the third program round is running, and we are already preparing the fourth round, which is going to start in July of this year. This program consists of several phases. The first one is, or phase 0, as I call it here, is the application and nomination phase, and we are currently in this phase for the fourth round of our program. And in July we will start with a summer school, which contains then refresher courses in German or English, plus courses on academic culture in Germany. Phase 2 and 3 are dedicated to intensive language courses in German or English. And with these language courses, we try to bridge the gap between the courses that are provided by the immigration offices in Germany, which those courses end at level B1, and university admission requires level C1 of the Common European framework of reference for languages. So we try to bridge this gap by our intensive language courses. And then the last part of our program is a second summer school next year, which contains crash courses in the other language, meaning German for the ones who attended the English track and vice versa. And also this summer school too contains a course on academic working and writing. And with this package we try to prepare our participants for study programs at our university or at other universities in Schleswig-Holstein. What do we do in the program? What do we do in the application and nomination phase? We assess and recognize educational certificates. That's something we do in our unit. We execute language placement tests for those who can't provide a certificate. We also execute plausibility interviews and study aptitude tests for those refugees who can't provide educational certificates because they may have lost them during their flight. During the program phase, we provide a guest auditor status to our participants, which means that they can use the EUF's infrastructure, such as the library and the wireless network and other things. And they can also attend freely the lectures and seminars at our university. We have been able to negotiate an extension of the student semester ticket to our participants. Student semester ticket is only for students normally, but we were able to extend it to our guest auditors. And we have cooperation agreements with the neighboring counties and municipalities so that commuting costs for participants from these areas are reimbursed by the local authorities there. And at the end of our program, we also offer a language proficiency test in German and English, based on which our participants can then apply for a university study with us. So that is basically it. I would like to say that I'm very interested in learning from you, from your experiences, for example, with regard to integrating female refugees not only into preparation programs but also into university studies, because we have identified that as a problem. I'm also interested in like ideas on how to open teacher training to refugees. Also on exploring cooperation possibilities with you, for example, with regard to common study programs that could benefit not only domestic students but also refugee students, for example, on post-conflict reconstruction and governance, something like that. So if you have ideas on that, I'm very happy if we talk about that after my presentation, during the next break, or during the next days. Yeah, so that's it. Thanks a lot. Okay, I didn't need that.
Thank you, Thomas. We are very happy to have learned from you about the ProRef project, which is a program for academic preparation. Now we have a third presenter, which is Ignazio Sella for Universidad Camilo José Cela.
Come? The other one?
We changed the program.
That's Almana.
I cannot see. Hello. You are from the same university, right?
Università Camilo José. Sì, era una presentazione joint.
Okay. So the floor is yours.
Good morning, thank you. One second. Thank you, and thanks for the University of Sapienza for inviting us and hosting us to share our experience with you today. Let's get right to it. My name is Motaz. It's spelled M-O-T-A-Z. I'm 24 years old, and I'm from Syria. It's been a long journey since I left Syria. Actually, yesterday was my 5th anniversary outside of Syria. I lived in Lebanon for a year and another year in Germany. Things weren't that easy at the beginning, but if you bear with me, I promise you a happy ending. I was 19 when I got my high school diploma, and just like everyone else, I couldn't wait to start university. Unfortunately, I only went there for a couple of hours. The next day, I received a message from my friend telling me that our university had gotten completely destroyed right after we had left. And just like that, my educational dreams vanished, as well as my home, city, and most importantly, the people I knew. I repeatedly had to move to a new city with my family, but that wasn't enough. The war is merciless. That was when I fled to Lebanon, but my family couldn't make it with me. I spent 1 year there, and just like you'd imagine, life conditions weren't exactly the best. I spent 1 year trying to achieve a decent life there, but it was nearly impossible. After a very tough year, I went to Germany, like all refugees do, trying to get the proper education that I had denied. After a year of being constantly moved around, I was told that I couldn't stay there according to the Dublin regulation, so I went to Spain, always with the desire to live a decent life. On my first year there, I quickly realized that language is an essential tool to achieve this. So I went to the library for 8 hours a day, every single day, for 3 months. After learning Spanish, I was able to land a couple of jobs. Things didn't go as well, so I kept looking for that one thing that could solve it all. I always knew that one thing was education, but it wasn't that easy to get it. I validated my high school diploma, and I did the Cambridge C1 English test. So I had the tools, but I was waiting for that opportunity. After a long, desperate 2 years, I found out about the inThegra project, or how they say in Spanish, Proyecto Integra, which is a pioneer project done by the University of Camilo José Cela, or UCJC, I'll refer to it from now, and has been recognized by lots of groups and people. I myself had the chance to explain the project in the European Parliament in the month of November, and later on to the former President of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon. So this project awards 10 scholarships to 10 refugees. With my Spanish level and my English certificate, I fulfilled the requirements, and luckily they chose me. On my first year, UCJC offered a preparation year in which we studied Spanish, history, law, sport, and even emotional management. They also offered a free room and board. Now, I'm studying the double degree of sports science and physiotherapy. And I can assure you that inThegra project isn't only a scholarship. For me, inThegra is hope, is prosperity, advancement, education, and the reason I'm standing here today. Well, sitting down, but. UCJC also offers a practica program so we can finish studying and get a gist of what work is to complete that circle of a good model of integration, in my opinion. So in conclusion, and in my point of view, this is a very good integration program. I'm a part of it, and I can assure you that it works. Integration via education is one of the best ideas that I have experienced. I hope to see it happening more with more people. Thank you all. This is a video about the inThegra project.
I think we have time.
Of course, there's no sound.
If you want, we have time to see the video.
Okay. But there's
No,
no
if you
sound.
want. No sound.
I don't know.
Someone can help him to show the video?
Possiamo anche avere l'audio.
proceed. We're almost there.
Los sentimientos son complejos, pero lo que siempre está en el centro es intentar sobrevivir.
Estudié en Siria ingeniería civil, pero no me daba tiempo a ejercer mi carrera por empezar la guerra.
Es un miedo que tú no sabes si vas a salir y si vuelves o no.
Las terroristas hablaban por mensajes, por cartas, y ellos nos miraban como infieles y era un honor para ellos matarnos.
Se explota una bomba cerca de casa y este sonido, todo eso, los disparos de las armas.
Hay que intentar no olvidar, sino no centrarte mucho en lo que pasó y centrarte más en las cosas pequeñas, buenas, lo que pasa contigo.
Para mí era muy difícil dejar mi habitación.
Yo decidí dejar mi familia, mis amigos, mis recuerdos y salir de mi país.
Cuando llegué en España, sí que la verdad no sabía ni el idioma ni la cultura española.
En 3 meses estuve hablando español más o menos.
Empezamos a estudiar cosas para prepararnos a enfrentar lo que vamos a vivir en estos años.
Nos estamos integrando bien y me siento muy cómodo.
Cuando escuché sobre el proyecto Integra, fue como un milagro para mí porque me dijeron que tienes una oportunidad de entrar a la universidad.
Una beca para 10 refugiados que quieran seguir sus estudios universitarios.
Me gustaría ser en futuro diplomático para que en mi país se reconozcan los derechos que tienen.
Construir mi futuro con éxitos.
Eso es lo que quiero, ¿no? Eso es mi objetivo, para que pueda ser una persona más útil en la sociedad.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, I think we had a very comprehensive outlook of a number of activities and best practices of from different parts of Europe. And I don't know, I think we have some time for questions from the audience or requests of intervention, if there are any. Please don't be shy, you have the possibility to express. Okay, please.
There is a microphone for the joiners.
Thank you very much again, and I think the next one should start with him.
Yeah, sure.
Because this is really what is at the heart of what we live and what we do every day. Thank you very much. It was very emotional and it was very encouraging to see that these small examples are the ones that make the difference. I didn't want to repeat what I said or re-summarize, but there was a few things that were missing. One, which is very important, which I wanted actually to ask at the beginning, is refugee participation. These programs can and should be run by refugees. And in fact, I was going to ask, is there any refugee in the room? And there he was at the end. And why do we emphasize this? Because as UNHCR, what we have been doing for 50 years is listen to refugees. We don't work for, we work with refugees. And part of what we're trying to do in Europe is to change that vision of the state is responsible for everything, we don't do anything. We're trying to engage more, and that's part of what is coming out on the Global Compact for Refugees, which is an inclusive response where refugees are at the center of that response. So I think I just wanted to thank you again, because that reminded me of that is it what where we should start, is this dialogue and consultation with refugees. There was just a couple of other points that I thought were very important. One is what Marcello, you mentioned about advocacy. Without that advocacy, and this is not only about Europe, this is worldwide advocacy on access to rights for refugees. And I think that is something that we should discuss more. I mean, I'm going today, I go from here straight to the airport to go to Spain, to Melilla, to Bilbao, to Madrid, to see some of what is happening there. And there's a lot to do in terms of advocacy and ensuring that the legal part of refugee protection is actually implemented. And I think we're still far from there. And the academia will play a key role. And that advocacy is not only the legal rights advocacy, it's the social awareness advocacy, which I think with examples like this, we can do a lot more. And actually joining those alliances and networks to disseminate this information. You saw our logo there. I had not seen it. And I mean, I'm the regional rep for Spain. I had not seen it. And I think that's something that we should commit ourselves to do more using media. The other aspect, I think, is cooperation, and you mentioned it as well, cooperation of universities, not only from the European countries, but also South universities. I mean, right now, I'm from Colombia. We are confronted with the Venezuela situation. We have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Venezuelans today out of the country. And we need to do more in terms of bringing together that capacity and that knowledge that exists in other countries, in the academia of other countries, to inter-exchange with you guys. Probably 4 themes that I thought also will come out of the discussion. One is data, information. Who has the information? Who is responsible for the information? Well, unfortunately, it's not UNHCR. In most countries in Europe, it's the state. And we are working very hard on trying to get the right information about refugees. Forget about confidentiality. It's about knowing the skills. What have they studied? Where have they worked? What kind of experience they have? The number, you know, if you knew Syria before the war, you will know that it was a country, and you probably do, a country with an incredible academic richness. Where the quality of medicine and education was probably the best in the Middle East. So those refugees are already here in Europe, and I think we need to do more to find them and get that information. Mapping all these initiatives, and everybody talks about networking and mapping, and in itself is already quite a lot what has been done, but I think we could do more. We as UNHCR, at least for the region that I'm responsible for, are committed to improve and do more in terms of the mapping. Private sector, I mentioned already a little bit, and I think that's where we really need to think in concrete examples of how to build networks with private sector, because it is, at the end, the link between being educated and having access to a professional working opportunity and employment. And finally, the importance of actually not forgetting that we can all be eventually refugees. Yes, we are in Europe. Yes, we are in the developed world. Yes, but nobody is exempted of becoming a displaced person or a refugee. So learning from that experience and being ready to confront things that could still happen is very important. I think Italy is probably, and I'm talking about Italy now, I studied myself post-war recovery in York University in the UK. I studied resource management in Australia. There was a lot more on humanitarian response, humanitarian preparedness, understanding better what is it that happens around the world, and I think we can do more in terms of the actual subjects of what we teach in universities in the region, and we as UNHCR would be very happy to contribute and support. Thank you so much. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Felipe. I think there are requests of intervention. Yes, I think it's the only microphone that we have, so please come here. You should come here.
I a representative of the UNHCR. What's the position of UNHCR in course of the employment of the refugee students have been graduated like this qualified student? This is a so important issue because I think it's interconnected to the education, right? To employment is one of the most important issue. But just wasn't specific initiatives or programs of the UNHCR in this case. Thank you so much.
Good question. Thank you.
There are other questions? Yes, please come here because otherwise we cannot hear you. No.
Shout? No.
It's not possible. Believe me.
You are young. You can run.
You can run.
You can run.
Introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Derek. I'm doing my master's in Development and International Cooperation Sciences. And I think he has raised the first question that I wanted to ask because at the end of the day, we are orienting and trying to integrate like the refugees or migrants into the system. What are the initiatives that we are doing to make sure that these people are in front? Because people like him knows much better the information in their country more than us. And secondly, I wanted to ask countries that are rejecting or refusing to receive refugees. We have had a series of information in the internet whereby countries like Hungary, Austria, and other European countries that do not really want to assimilate to refugees. Here's the case that these countries also have great universities and kind of great international courses over there. But at the end of the day, they are under some political or governmental structures. How are we going to make sure that the political influence and the governmental structures do not put much effort on the administration of the universities, because they are not an idle man? How can we make sure as international fraternity make sure that the universities in those areas also accept refugees and also try as much as possible to help? Because who knows, maybe they want to, but at the end of the day, there's political pressures and governmental structures that's not allowing them to do so. And the one that I also want to ask is about the language barrier, which is very much difficult. I'm not a refugee though, but I have some kind of problems when I was enrolling in the university, even though my course is in English. But how much best do we try to socially, culturally, economically, in any way, politically, try to make sure that there's language assimilation of the person? Because for the person to be able to communicate well, or for us to do away with communication gap, there should be understanding of what the person speaks and what also I speak. What is the university trying to do to help refugees or migrants to be able to assimilate themselves in terms of the language aspect? And lastly, we know that these people or the refugees are coming from their country. They know the problems and the root causes of issues in the country. What are the causes or the right thing for us to allow themselves to be able to give the solutions to the problems over there? Because they know what is going on. So are we just allowing them to do any other course because that is the course or the slot that is available for them? Because I can imagine that maybe in the framework of every institution or every university, there's a slot for European students, there's a slot for African students, there's a slot for refugee students, there's a slot for this and that. But at the end of the day, are we able to expand the slots for these kind of refugees to be able to learn, because they know the problems over there? Like, for instance, let's say maybe international cooperation or maybe terrorism courses. Are we giving more rooms for them to be enrolled on such courses? Because that is the need of them. Or are we trying to use the bureaucratic system of admitting students into the university discourse community? Because I think that if we give a lot of room for what is needed to solve the solution of they migrating from their country. That will better solve the problem much more than any other thing. And lastly, how are they communicate? How are we helping them to communicate with the people over there also for better opportunities? Because who knows, there are people that are also there that need better opportunities to come all over to save themselves and also help the world to become a better place. But at the end of the day, there's this kind of shattered bridge or way for them to communicate. Thank you.
Wow. Thousands of questions. Very
Yes,
good.
a lot of questions. Are there additional requests or questions?
I'm sorry, you have to join us.
Yes, exactly.
But
Oh,
no,
right.
No, there is a microphone. We know that you want to run, but...
Okay, thank you. My name is Sonia Gricht, and I'm a consultant for Education International, which is the global federation of teacher unions and associations. And I work on this issue of integrating refugees in education. And my intervention is more a reaction because I don't think there is room for answers here, but I understand that there are a lot of practitioners in the room, so I think it's interesting if you notice me that you can then come to me during the break or during the lunch for further discussion and networking. My organization, Education International, has been carrying some work, especially in Europe, about the role of unions and how, and the role of teachers in terms of providing better education opportunities for refugees. And we have carried out a research about integration of refugees in education, which has not so much covered the higher education sector, so this is very interesting for me to be here and hear a little bit what are the challenges for the higher education sector. But when I look at the title of this event, we've talked a lot about the access of refugees to higher education, but we are talking also about the role of universities, and one of the findings of the research is that universities have a key role in terms of preparing the teachers, right, and giving them the skills to accommodate the needs of refugee students at elementary and secondary level. So I'm really interested in knowing from you if there are any initiatives that we know that in Sweden, this is another. I'm going to stress this point later, but yeah, what are universities doing in terms of adapting the teacher education curriculum to accommodate the needs of refugees? Another important point is about refugee teachers. In many European countries, and we don't know for the rest of the world, displaced teachers don't have an opportunity to be integrated in the education workforce of their host country. And we know that in Sweden and Germany, there are a few initiatives in collaboration with unions to recognize the skills and qualifications of displaced teachers or education staff and integrate them as sometimes teachers, sometimes language assistants in the schools of the host country. So I'm also eager to hear from you if there are any university represented here that has developed some initiatives on this. And then one other point that I wanted to raise is about the role of staff in the universities, because we talk a lot, it seems like one of the most important issues about access for refugee students. So once they are in the university, how you see the role of staff, academic staff, but also probably mainly also administrative staff that have to deal with day-to-day obstacles that refugees might face, how staff could be better supported in this task. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there are no other questions, I leave the floor back to Felipe to give some replies.
Thank you. I mean, I don't have all the replies, particularly about the last point, but I think, first of all, I wanted also to thank the colleague from New York, because I think it was very powerful. This kind of tool is really something that we can build upon, and it is very, very useful. Years ago, I was thinking, when would be the day that we can really go into one site and have all this information about access to education? First, on the question of work permits, you know, it is one of our main priorities in terms of advocacy. Of course, once a refugee is recognized, and even during the process of recognition, there is a set of rights that they have to in each country. And I keep asking this question in Italy when I was in Sicily, at Mineo, where there's about 1,000 or 2,000 refugees in one site, asylum seekers in one reception center. Why they cannot work? And say, oh, no, they can work, they go during the day and they come back. Actually, legally, they can work. You know, I came to Italy as a student, I was allowed to work legally for 22 hours a week, and that, it seems, it hasn't changed. The question is not about the right to work, it's about the abuse of employees, of workers. And I think that is an area where research, investigation would really help us. We raise these issues on a continuous basis. First, because there's probably not even knowledge about the legislation, very limited knowledge. So we work with governments, not only with the Italian government, but with other governments, on ensuring that the legislation allows both asylum seekers and refugees to have access to work. It is at the center of the Compact on Refugees, and I was in Geneva for the last 3 years working on emergencies, and during the NGO consultations, representatives of the refugee organizations basically said, it's the one we want you to focus on, access to work. So we are actually in our office looking very actively about how whatever needs to be done from the legal point of view, from the dissemination of information to the private sector, to discuss also with the unions is not easy. We have unions that immediately reacted to the Premio welcome, say, why are you giving jobs to refugees when we have so many Italians without jobs? Well, on Sunday, I don't know if you read the article, in I think it was Corriere, basically said Italians that are receiving the benefit do not want to work. I'm sorry, it's on the papers, it's not me criticizing. So I think it's very easy to manipulate politically this issue of employment. There is a right, there are opportunities, we need to do more together to advocate for this right to be implemented, and we need to do research on market opportunities. Where are the areas? We are now working with Andrea, we're working on the agricultural sector. There's plenty to do on the agricultural sector in Italy to include more workers.
At the moment, they are uninformal.
Uninformal, exactly. Uninformal in conditions. People in Sicily are working for 80 cents of a euro per hour. 80 cents. And when you ask, do they work? People, oh no, but nobody wants to answer. You see in the morning all the bicycles going to work in the farmland, come back in the evening. They are making 80 cents. It's illegal. Simple as that. There was a lot of other questions from our friend, but I cannot really answer all of them. I think knowledge sharing is one of the key priorities of what you were saying. People come with the knowledge, they know what the conditions are in their own country. They play a key role, and that's why we are now focusing so much in the participation of refugees. We just did, in the last couple of weeks, a support to establish a coalition of refugee organizations in Italy. And I said to them, it's not about us being at the center. It's about you deciding if it is useful or not for the organizations to have our support as a facilitator, but for you to own the process, because at the end they need to maintain their independence. We are a governmental organization. They need to maintain that independence as civil society, but we would like to facilitate that process to actually bring that knowledge of what happens in their countries of origin to the way we find solutions not only here, but eventually to go back if they decide to return to their countries. Language, absolutely, and I think that is a priority for us. I did it myself, and I love the story of our friend in Syria, because 8 hours a day studying a language, that's exactly what I did when I learned English, that's exactly what I did when I learned Italian, and that's exactly what I did when I learned French. And I speak other languages, but I'm not going to talk about myself, but language is more than just a class. Language is catching a bus and having the opportunity to communicate and to share your own experiences, your own feelings. And we really want to explore creative ways of teaching a language. And we have some experiences where it's at no cost by people themselves that volunteer to teach refugees. And that is something that universities can also help us to do. I don't know if I could not really answer to all of them. How to change is the knowledge of the universities and bring universities together. I think we answered partially that by talking about universities from both South and North sharing experiences and knowledge. I have to apologize because I have a plane to catch. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. And Marcello, would like to replicate?
Probably there is another question there.
Yes, please.
Sorry, Harriet.
Yeah, it's working. Hello. Thanks. Actually, not a question. I just wanted to answer one of the questions that was raised with regards to higher education institutions. I'm from the European University Association. As most of the participants already know, we represent 850 institutions, and 300 or so of those are on our mapping on the Refugees Welcome Map. The question that I want to answer is how to make other universities, especially those in, let's say, difficult countries, or however you might say, and Hungary was specifically mentioned there, also take in refugees. And my short answer is, we see this from our mapping and from our work with universities, they do. I mean, universities are autonomous institutions in most countries in Europe, and of course they can make autonomous decisions. I don't know if the question was raised in connection to Hungary specifically because of the situation of one of the institutions there, and I'm sorry for hijacking this moment and just doing 3 sentences on this specific topic. As you see, I was hacking away on my phone very rudely, and that was because we just issued a statement about the Central European University that might get shut down because of the Hungarian government's legislation attacking it for several reasons, but one of them certainly is that they also take in refugees. They have refugee access programs, and in this regard, beyond networking and sharing information with your peers from other universities, it is very important that there is also a pressure put on governments who try to interfere with universities supporting refugees, migrants, or any other matters of academic freedom for that matter. Thank you.
Is there... Please, introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hi, I'm Marta Ferretti, and I'm here with UNESCO. I'm an education specialist. And let me begin by saying UNESCO has a report called the Global Education Monitoring Report, and it has different themes. The last theme was accountability. The next one is migration. And so I'm actually writing a chapter on higher education for refugees, and I'm sort of scoping out innovative initiatives. And so if you have things going on, please let me know, and I'm happy to be in touch about that. I'm Canadian, and there is an excellent program there called the World University Service of Canada Student Refugee Program. And as people were talking on the panels and in their questions, I realized that this program actually has elements of what everybody is talking about, which is, it's actually a youth-led program, and youth are sponsoring youth. Basically, Canada has a private citizenship program, so a private sponsorship model where private citizens, 5 or more, can work together, sponsor a refugee directly from the camp, and these refugees actually enter Canada and land in a university campus. So they're not entering Toronto, but they're entering University of Toronto, and it's a microcosm of society. The best part about this project is they actually land and have a committee of students surrounding them for their social support. And they actually come about 3 months early from the academic year to do the remedial courses and the language training. The financial model is the most interesting part. When you pay tuition in Canada, you have an opt-out, not opt-in, but opt-out little box if you want to give $1, 20 cents, 50 cents to this project. And that is the way the sponsorships are basically. And if you multiply this by 20,000 or 10,000 students, as you can see, so it's fully students, Canadian students, sponsoring other Canadian students. And one of the most interesting points and positive points I heard today also was that we should not look at refugees from a deficit model, but rather from a capacity model. And the fact that these refugees, the program has actually graduated about 2,000 refugee students since it began in 1978. And these students are now working, they are mentors, they are sending remittances back home, they are advocating, and some of them are now lawyers and doing work to actually change policy. So basically, if anybody wants to know anything about this program in Canada, I've studied for about 100 years, and so I'm happy to share with you what a country that has a long history and is essentially a country of immigrants has been doing for quite some time now. Thank you.
Okay, Marcello, like to reply?
Sì, no. Just some comment, because to answer is really challenging. I want to start from particular the questions that disappear our guest, but in any case, about what the university can do in terms of languages. For example, there are lots of initiatives about that, and also we listen about several experiences of European universities that are doing fantastic job and so on. But at the end, we have to reflect also about the obstacles to answer to the problem, because the huge number of refugees are not in Europe, are in Lebanon, in Jordan, in north of Iraq, and so on. In Syria are displaced people, and so on. In Lebanon, there are universities that they don't want refugees. It's clear. It's not a problem of money. It's not a problem of political obstacles coming from the minister. They don't want refugees. The Lebanese system, higher education system, is quite particular. There's just one public university where there are a lot of refugees. Then there are only private universities, and some of them, for their own vision, they don't want any refugees. If he's a Syrian student want to pay to be enrolled, that's okay. But they don't want to host refugees. How to solve this? The only answer in some way is to improve through our networking activity and our discussion with politicians, policymakers and so on, to improve the capacity of the universities to be able to answer to this problem, not only in financial terms, because they could open the door easily if they want, but in political terms. This is the main issue. So this is the reason why, for example, in the framework of inHere project, we organize a policy dialogue conference next month in Paris, organized by Campus France, jointly with the Bologna process ministerial conference that will take place in the same period, in the same week in Paris, and so on. Our idea is, why not to try to influence ministers, politicians, rectors, presidents of universities, to try to give their best from their different perspective, because otherwise it's quite impossible to solve the problem of higher education in the region. And the last comment, also the issue of employability that was mentioned is absolutely important. But I was in Damascus some years ago, before the war, during Ramadan, and visiting the mosque. I was very impressed about the charity institution that delivering food for poor people at the end of the day, when Ramadan finished. And there were in the chiostro, in the claustrum of the mosque, 2,000 people waiting to start to eat. It was a charity organization of the mosque, probably financed by local contribution and so on. And they invited us. We were tourists, you can imagine. I was there for a project and so on. They invited us to have lunch with them. And we did this very particular experience when Ramadan started. All these poor people start to eating. No one was doing any noises and so on. Very silent, very... I think that now is the moment that university, all universities, because with the experience, and thank you, Almotats, for your presentation, because if you see your experiences, 10 students, we are discussing about 5 million refugees, probably 6 million, figures are complicated. 10 students, obviously, is not the answer, but 10 students each university. In Europe and in the region, you can imagine how many students we are able to host in our universities. And as Felipe said, I think that the university in the region has to play in Lebanon, in Jordan, in Iraq, and obviously in the other Arab countries, an important role. Because otherwise, we will discuss what we have to do, but it's impossible to solve the problem as it is. If we look at the European policy, again, was advocated how to improve the answer of European policy. It's impossible. It's completely impossible to try to answer to that. To come back to the proposal that UNIMED is trying to underline is our role is not to act directly for refugees, but to help our universities and to invite policymakers to pay more attention to the Euro-Mediterranean cooperation and to the refugees situation in particular. And I hope that through these projects we are at least able to influence you, that's work in university, to influence students, to integrate in their own experiences other colleagues as refugees, and to continue to work with us because otherwise alone it's impossible to do something concrete. And I finish just to thank again Sapienza International Department people that are working with us very hard, and obviously my colleagues of UNIMED. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcello. I think that's all for now. We had a very productive morning, and personally learned a lot about the activities, and I know that you have a full week of activities ahead, so good luck for all the activities. I don't know if I should do some announcement. No. Okay, thank you very much. Hold on, yeah.